They pranked a poor mechanic with a blind date, but the CEO's daughter whispered, "I like him." Raj wiped the sweat from his brow, the smell of oil and metal clinging to his shirt. It was another hot day at the small garage tucked into a quiet corner of the city, a place that smelled of motor oil, rubber, and hard work. Raj had been fixing cars since he was a teenager. His hands were rough, his fingers calloused, and his nails perpetually blackened with grease, but he loved what he did. Despite the long hours and the modest pay, he felt proud. He wasn't rich, but he had dignity, honesty, and a sense of purpose. Raj's garage wasn't fancy. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars of nuts and bolts. Stacks of tires leaned in every corner, and a few old posters of cars adorned the walls. The tools weren't new, and sometimes they made a squeaky sound when used, but they were his instruments of work. Every car that came through his garage received careful attention. Whether it was a luxury sedan or a beaten-up old scooter, Raj treated each vehicle with the same level of care. On this particular afternoon, Raj was working on a small hatchback. A young man had brought it in complaining of engine trouble, and Raj had already diagnosed the problem. As he tightened the last bolt, the sound of a car horn outside drew his attention. It was noisy and impatient, something that irritated him, but he didn't want to shout. He wiped his hands again, leaving dark streaks across his shirt, and stepped outside. Waiting by the roadside was his friend Samir, a lanky young man with an impish grin. Samir had always been a bit of a troublemaker, and today he looked particularly excited. "Raj, you won't believe what's happening," Samir said, almost bouncing on his heels. Raj frowned. "I'm busy, Samir, what's the hurry?" "Don't ask questions, just go." Samir's eyes sparkled with mischief. "It's interesting, trust me." He had learned over the years that when Samir looked this excited, it usually meant a prank, or something that would completely turn his world upside down. Still, curiosity won over caution. By early evening, Raj found himself standing outside a high-end restaurant, the kind of place he had only seen in movies or on the rare occasions he visited the city center. The glass doors reflected his image, the shirt he had thrown on after work still streaked with oil, his hair messy from a long day of fixing engines. He felt out of place, a small-town mechanic standing at the doorstep of a world that seemed completely foreign. He hesitated, then entered. Inside, the restaurant glowed with warm lights and soft music played in the background. The tables were covered with crisp white linens, and the chairs looked like they had been designed for comfort and style rather than function. Waiters moved gracefully, carrying trays with delicate plates that smelled like spices Raj had never known existed. He felt a little overwhelmed, his heart pounding, not from the heat outside, but from the thought of meeting someone he didn't know, someone who probably belonged to this world entirely. A woman was already seated at a table near the center of the room. She looked up when he approached. Her elegance struck him immediately. She wasn't just beautiful, there was a quiet confidence in her posture, a sparkle in her eyes, and a calm smile that made the room seem brighter. Raj paused, unsure how to greet her. "Raj?" the woman asked gently, tilting her head. "Yes," he said, his voice slightly trembling. "That's me." "It's nice to meet you." He had never been to a place like this before, and he certainly had never imagined being here with someone like Mira. Yet despite his nervousness, there was a strange sense of calm about her presence. She wasn't judgmental or condescending. She simply smiled, observing him, waiting patiently. "So, do you come here often?" Raj asked, immediately regretting the cliché. Mira chuckled softly. "Not really. I don't usually go to restaurants like this, but it's nice, isn't it?" He told her stories of long nights working on bikes and cars, helping people who couldn't afford fancy repairs. Mira listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine curiosity. She didn't interrupt, and she didn't pretend to understand everything. She simply listened and smiled, encouraging him to speak. Raj began to relax. The awkwardness faded, replaced by the comfort of being heard. He noticed small things about Mira, how she laughed easily, how her eyes seemed to sparkle when she was genuinely interested, how her hands moved gracefully across the table. Despite the difference in their worlds, he felt a connection forming, a bridge of understanding that didn't rely on wealth or status. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the restaurant, Samir and a few others were watching through a small window. They had planned the prank, expecting Raj to feel embarrassed, awkward, or even insulted. They had imagined him stumbling over words, making mistakes, or saying something that would make the whole situation hilarious. But as they watched, their amusement began to fade, replaced by surprise. Raj was calm, respectful, and even charming. Mira seemed genuinely interested, leaning slightly forward when he spoke, laughing at his stories and making him feel at ease. The friends exchanged glances. Their prank wasn't going as planned. Raj wasn't humiliated. Instead, he was shining. Back at the table, Raj spoke about his life outside the garage, his love for simple things, the joy of helping his neighbors, and the small victories that made every hard day worth it. Mira listened, nodding, smiling, and occasionally asking questions that made him pause, think, and then explain in greater detail. The conversation flowed naturally, and Raj felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't expected. By the time the first course arrived, he was laughing freely, his nervousness gone. Mira laughed too, and the sound felt like music to his ears. It was a simple dinner, but for Raj, it was unlike anything he had experienced before. It wasn't about wealth, appearances, or expectations. It was about two people talking, sharing, and discovering each other in a moment that neither of them wanted to end. As the evening progressed, Raj realized something he hadn't expected. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there simply to be himself. And being himself, honest, humble, and hardworking, was enough. Mira's attention and interest weren't because of a joke, or a test, or a challenge. It was because of him. By the time the evening ended, Raj walked out of the restaurant with a lightness in his step he hadn't felt in years. The city lights glimmered around him, and the air felt warmer, almost as if it had been waiting for this moment. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if he would ever see Mira again, but he knew one thing for certain: tonight had changed something inside him. He smiled to himself, a quiet, contented smile, and for the first time in a long time he felt that life could hold unexpected surprises, ones that weren't cruel but kind, generous, and magical in the simplest way. The next morning, Raj woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his small window. The sunlight spilled across his modest room, casting warm patterns on the floor. He sat up on his bed, stretching his arms, and for a moment his mind wandered back to the previous evening. The dinner at the restaurant, meeting Mira, her gentle smile, and the ease of their conversation replayed in his mind. He couldn't believe how natural it had felt, almost like he had known her for a long time, even though it was only a few hours. Raj's small room was neat but simple. A single bed with a thin mattress, a wooden wardrobe with peeling paint, and a small table with a few scattered tools that he sometimes used for personal projects. He had grown accustomed to living modestly, focusing on his work rather than luxuries. But last night had opened a door to a world he hadn't imagined himself entering. Not the wealth or the fancy restaurants, but the feeling that someone could see him, not just the mechanic, not just the man covered in grease and sweat, but him, Raj. As he prepared for another day at the garage, Raj couldn't help smiling. He was a simple man, and he knew that life rarely offered surprises like the one he had experienced. He was careful not to let himself get carried away. After all, it was a blind date arranged without his knowledge. Who knew what Mira actually thought? But still, there was a warmth in his chest that made him move with a lighter step than usual. At the garage, his routine picked up immediately. Cars rolled in one after another, customers needing urgent repairs, tires replaced, engines tuned. Raj worked tirelessly, his hands moving with skill and precision, yet his mind kept drifting to Mira. When he thought he had put her out of his mind, a message arrived on his phone. "Good morning, Raj. I hope your day is going well." Mira. My day has just started, but your message made it better. Hope your morning is going well too. He moved with a spring in his step, laughed a little more freely, and even greeted the customers with a warmer smile. His best friend and fellow mechanic, Samir, noticed immediately and smirked knowingly. "You're in trouble, Raj," Samir teased, leaning against a workbench. "And I don't mean trouble at the garage. Someone has your heart racing." "It's just a dinner, Samir. Don't get carried away." Everything in her life seemed polished and planned. Her family had wealth, status, and influence, but Mira often felt the pressure of expectations, the weight of always needing to appear perfect. Yet last night had been different. She recalled the way Raj had spoken about his life, the joy he found in small victories, the pride he felt in his work. He had no airs, no pretensions, and yet he had carried himself with a quiet dignity that left her both surprised and intrigued. She had met countless men from similar backgrounds to hers, all polished and well-groomed, all following the same predictable paths. But Raj was different. He was honest, sincere, and completely unaware of the difference in their social worlds. During the day, she found herself thinking about him more than she expected. Even in meetings with business partners and staff, her mind drifted to the garage, to the sound of his laughter, the earnest way he had described fixing engines, and the genuine kindness in his eyes. She wasn't used to such distractions, but she welcomed it. For the first time in a long time, she felt a spark that had nothing to do with wealth or influence, but with the simple, authentic nature of a person she had just met. Back at the garage, Raj was finishing up with a late afternoon repair. A small family had brought in a minivan that refused to start, and he had worked for hours, tightening bolts, checking the engine, and finally getting it running again. The family thanked him profusely, offering a small tip which he politely refused. "It's my work," he said, smiling. "Seeing you drive safely is enough. People notice when someone's happy, and you're like the sun right now. What's going on?" But in the back of his mind, he couldn't help feeling excited about what might happen next. Evening arrived, and Raj decided to take a walk through the nearby park before heading home. The sky was painted with soft hues of pink and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Children played on swings, couples strolled hand in hand, and the air smelled faintly of blooming flowers and fresh grass. Raj's mind wandered back to Mira. He wondered if she would think of him, if she would smile at the memory of their conversation, and if she would feel the same unexpected connection that he did. At the same time, Mira had been encouraged by a small note from her father's assistant, a reminder of her duties and a list of meetings. But her thoughts were elsewhere. She found herself replaying the dinner over and over, remembering the way Raj had laughed when she asked about his toughest repairs, how his eyes lit up when he explained why he loved his work, and how he hadn't seemed intimidated or awed by the fancy surroundings. There was a freshness in him, a reality that made her world seem smaller yet brighter at the same time. Days passed. Raj and Mira exchanged a few messages, each one short and polite at first, but slowly growing warmer and more personal. They shared small stories, laughed at little jokes, and began to look forward to each other's messages. Raj, who had never imagined that a simple mechanic's life could intersect with a world so different, began to feel a sense of anticipation he had never experienced before. Then came the day of the planned prank. Raj had no idea it was coming. The friends who had arranged the blind date had decided to reveal their joke, expecting him to feel embarrassed. They thought it would be funny to watch him realize that the dinner was meant to amuse them, not to create a real connection. Samir, unable to contain his excitement, finally told Raj, "Hey, just so you know, it wasn't exactly serious. It was a setup, a little joke by some friends." Instead, he chose to face the situation with humor. He laughed, a deep, honest laugh. "Well," he said, wiping a hand across his forehead, "if that's the case, I guess I should thank them for an unforgettable evening." He had genuinely enjoyed the evening, and the connection they had begun to form felt real. He didn't want that to be ruined by a prank. Later that evening, they met again at the same restaurant, under the pretense of a casual dinner. Raj noticed a subtle change in Mira's demeanor. She seemed slightly amused, perhaps aware of the prank but choosing not to let it define their interaction. He felt a mixture of relief and curiosity, eager to see how this unexpected twist would play out. The evening had just begun, and Raj realized that life often had a way of surprising him. What started as a simple prank had turned into something far more meaningful than anyone could have imagined. And though he didn't know what the future held, he felt ready to face it, confident in the knowledge that authenticity and kindness could create connections that no joke could ever undo. The evening air was cool as Raj walked toward the restaurant, a mix of curiosity and nervous excitement building in his chest. He hadn't known what to expect after learning about the prank. Part of him had been hurt, of course. The thought that the dinner had been orchestrated as a joke stung. Yet, beneath the initial shock, he felt an unexpected calm. He had enjoyed the previous evening, and the conversations with Mira had been genuine. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not for his job, his money, or his background, but simply for who he was. Raj pushed open the glass doors and stepped inside. The soft lighting of the restaurant cast a warm glow across the room. The familiar aroma of rich spices and fresh bread greeted him. He scanned the tables and spotted Mira, already seated, her posture relaxed yet elegant. She looked up as he approached, and their eyes met. There was a hint of amusement in her gaze, but also something softer, almost hesitant. "Raj," she said, her voice carrying that gentle warmth he remembered from the first dinner. "I'm glad you came." Mira chuckled softly. "You're very graceful about this," she said. "Most people would have been embarrassed or upset, but you seem calm." She leaned slightly forward, resting her chin on her hand. "I'm glad you see it that way. Honestly, I was curious about how you would react." "You're genuine." Raj spoke about his work at the garage, how he had started as a teenager, the challenges of running a small business, and the satisfaction of helping people. He shared small, personal stories. A customer who had broken down on a rainy night, a bike he had spent hours fixing for free because the owner couldn't afford the repair, and the pride he felt in being able to help. Mira listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "What made you choose this work?" she asked. "Why not something easier or more lucrative?" "Because I love it," he said simply. "I love working with my hands, seeing results, helping people. I may not earn much, but I feel satisfied at the end of the day. That's worth more than money." I think a lot of people forget what it means to find joy in simple things. Mira shared her own hopes, her struggles with expectations and pressure, and her desire to see the world beyond her family's wealth and influence. As they spoke, the prank faded into the background. For Raj, it no longer mattered that the dinner had been set up as a joke. What mattered was this moment, this connection, this unexpected meeting of two very different lives that somehow fit together in conversation. After a while, their food arrived, elegantly presented, almost unfamiliar to Raj. He looked at the plates, unsure how to eat the delicate dishes without making a mess. Mira noticed and smiled. "It's okay to ask for help," she said lightly. "You don't have to pretend you know everything." They were no longer the mechanic and the CEO's daughter. They were simply Raj and Mira, two people sharing a moment of honesty and understanding. After a few bites, Mira leaned slightly closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I like you," she said, almost as if afraid to be overheard. Raj froze for a moment, his fork halfway to his mouth. He blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. "You like me?" he asked, his voice gentle, tinged with disbelief. "Yes," she said, a faint smile curving her lips. "I like you, not because of your job or your background or anything else. Just you, the way you talk, the way you care about people. I like that." He had never imagined someone like Mira could feel this way about someone like him, yet hearing it directly from her made it real. I like you too," he admitted quietly, feeling a nervous but sincere happiness. "I didn't expect this at all, but I like you as well." The world outside, the wealth, the expectations, the prank, all of it seemed to fade. In that moment, nothing mattered except the connection growing quietly but steadily between them. Meanwhile, the group of friends who had arranged the prank were still watching from a distance. They had expected laughter at Raj's expense, a bit of embarrassment, maybe a story to tease him about for weeks. Instead, they were witnessing something completely different, two people connecting on a level they hadn't anticipated. The prank had failed in its purpose, but it had also unexpectedly created a bridge between two very different lives. As the evening continued, Raj and Mira talked about small things, the books they enjoyed, childhood memories, favorite hobbies, even dreams that seemed trivial but meaningful. They discovered surprising similarities despite their different upbringings, and each shared story built trust, laughter, and warmth. The waiter approached, offering dessert, but Raj shook his head. "I'm full," he said. "And honestly, I'm enjoying the company more than the food." "Thank you for tonight," Raj said, his voice steady but filled with genuine warmth. "Even after knowing it started as a prank, I'm glad I came. And I think that's something worth keeping." He thought about Mira's words, her whisper, her smile. Despite the differences in their worlds, they had found a connection that felt real, honest, and true. And in that realization, Raj understood something important. Life's most unexpected moments often brought the deepest joys. The following day, Raj returned to the garage, his hands already blackened with oil, the familiar scent of grease welcoming him. Yet, despite the monotony of repairs, a strange excitement lingered in his chest. Yesterday had been unlike anything he had imagined. Mira's words, her quiet smile, the way she had leaned slightly forward to whisper that she liked him, it all replayed endlessly in his mind. He had spent hours thinking about her, wondering what she thought of him now, and hoping that this connection was real, not just a fleeting moment. As he worked on an old sedan, tightening bolts and checking the engine, Samir leaned against the workbench, a sly grin on his face. "You know," he began, "I think it's time you knew the full story. It was a setup, a little prank by a few friends. They wanted to see your reaction when you met someone from a completely different world. And how am I supposed to feel about that?" For a moment he felt the sting of being deceived, but then he realized something important. The dinner, the conversation, the moments with Mira, none of that had been fake. Her interest, her words, her laughter, they were real. The prank had been the initial setup, but the connection that had formed between them had grown naturally, honestly, and unexpectedly. "Thanks for telling me," Raj said finally, a small smile appearing on his lips. "I guess I can laugh at it now, or at least try. Just meet her tonight, you'll see. It's going to be interesting." He spotted Mira at a table near the window, her posture relaxed, though her eyes held a glint of curiosity. She looked up and smiled, a smile that made Raj's chest tighten. "Raj," she said, her voice soft but warm, "I'm glad you came." "What is it?" Then a small, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. "I see," she said softly. "I suspected something like that, but I didn't want it to affect the evening. And more than that, I liked getting to know you. That part wasn't a joke." He realized that despite the initial setup, the connection they had formed was real and mutual. It was no longer about wealth or status, no longer about a joke or a test. It was about two people discovering each other in the most unexpected way. They spoke quietly, their voices blending with the soft music in the restaurant. Raj shared more stories about his life, his struggles, his hopes, his dreams. Mira listened intently, occasionally asking questions that made him pause, reflect, and open up even further. The conversation flowed naturally, with laughter, curiosity, and a quiet understanding that deepened with every word. At one point, Mira reached across the table, her fingers brushing his lightly. "I like you, Raj," she whispered again, her voice steady this time, filled with certainty. Even knowing about the prank, I still like you. I don't care about appearances or what others think. I like you for who you are." He had spent years focused on his work, his family, and surviving the challenges of life, never imagining that someone like Mira could see him, truly see him for who he was. "I like you too," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "More than I expected to like anyone, and it doesn't matter that it started as a prank. What matters is us right now." They had expected laughter at Raj's expense, maybe embarrassment, or a story to tease him about. Instead, they were witnessing something completely unexpected, two people forming a real, heartfelt connection. The prank had failed in its intended purpose, but it had also created an opportunity for something meaningful. As the evening continued, Raj and Mira shared more stories, laughed at small jokes, and discovered surprising similarities despite their very different lives. They talked about books, childhood memories, favorite foods, and dreams they had never shared with anyone else. Each shared detail built trust, understanding, and a growing sense of companionship. At one point, Mira paused, her eyes reflecting a flicker of uncertainty. "Raj, I don't want this to be complicated," she said. "My world, it's different from yours. I have responsibilities, expectations. I don't know how things will work if we continue this. And if you feel the same way, then we'll figure everything else out together. I'm not afraid of differences, Mira. I've learned that what matters most is honesty, kindness, and trust. And I want to see where this goes." In that small corner of the city, two people from different worlds had found a connection that neither of them had expected but both were willing to explore. As they finally left the restaurant, the cool night air enveloped them. Raj walked Mira to her car, and for a moment they stood together, not speaking, just sharing the quiet presence of each other. "Thank you for tonight," Raj said finally, his voice filled with warmth. "Even after everything, I'm glad I came. All of this, it means a lot to me." The prank had revealed itself to be insignificant compared to what had grown between them. It was not the laughter, the surprise, or the joke that mattered. It was the connection, the trust, and the understanding that had quietly blossomed. As they parted ways that night, both Raj and Mira felt a mixture of excitement and calm, knowing that whatever challenges awaited them, they had discovered something rare and genuine. And in that quiet realization, the world seemed a little brighter, a little warmer, and full of endless possibilities. The days that followed were a delicate balance between two very different worlds, yet Raj and Mira found themselves navigating them with surprising ease. Despite the stark contrast in their lives, Raj's modest garage and Mira's elegant world of wealth and influence, they discovered that the connection they had formed could bridge any gap. Raj returned to the garage each morning, hands coated with oil and sweat, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. He repaired engines with the same skill and care as always, yet a quiet joy accompanied his work. Each vehicle he touched reminded him of the previous dinners, the laughter shared, and the subtle glances exchanged with Mira. Life at the garage hadn't changed, but Raj himself had shifted. He felt lighter, more confident, and more alive than he had in years. Messages and calls between him and Mira became a daily ritual. They shared little stories about their days, discovered new interests together, and laughed at jokes only the two of them seemed to understand. Raj found himself eagerly anticipating her messages, his heart skipping whenever a notification popped up. Mira, too, felt a warmth she hadn't expected. She reveled in Raj's simplicity, his honesty, and the way he saw the world with genuine eyes, appreciating things often overlooked by those in her affluent circles. One evening, Mira invited Raj to her family's house. It was a grand residence with marble floors, high ceilings, and art that spoke of wealth and refinement. Raj felt a pang of nervousness as he approached. He wiped his hands nervously on his jeans and took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. The moment the door opened, Mira's father greeted him with a polite smile. "Raj," he said, his tone formal but courteous, "Welcome." Despite the grandeur, the warmth in her home surprised him. Her parents were genuinely curious about his life, asking questions about his work, his dreams, and how he spent his days. Raj answered with honesty and humility, never exaggerating or pretending. Her father, initially reserved, gradually warmed to him. "You care deeply about your work," he observed, studying Raj's eyes. "That is rare and commendable." Over the following weeks, Raj and Meera spent more time together. They explored parts of the city Raj had rarely visited, shared meals at local eateries and small cafes, and even spent time at the garage where Raj worked. Meera found herself fascinated by the rhythm of his world, the satisfaction of a well-repaired engine, the gratitude of customers, and the quiet pride Raj took in every task. She often rolled up her sleeves to help, though mostly to observe, and laughed when she fumbled with tools or asked a million questions. Raj would patiently guide her, his humor making her feel at ease despite her initial awkwardness. Meanwhile, Raj found himself learning from Meera as well. She showed him new perspectives, ideas, and experiences that broadened his world. He discovered books he had never read, foods he had never tasted, and cultural events he had never attended. Yet, he never felt uncomfortable or out of place because Meera treated him as an equal, never making him feel inferior or judged. As time passed, the couple faced small challenges, mostly from their differing backgrounds. Raj sometimes worried that his simple lifestyle might not fit into Meera's affluent world, and Meera occasionally wondered whether her family would fully accept a man from such a humble background. But each time, they confronted these worries openly, relying on honesty, patience, and mutual respect to navigate the complexities. One afternoon, Raj received an invitation from Meera's father to discuss something important. He approached the meeting with cautious anticipation, unsure of what to expect. Seated across from him, her father looked thoughtful. "Raj," he began, "I have been observing you for some time now. You are a good man, honest, hardworking, and sincere. Those are qualities that cannot be taught or bought. I trust Meera's judgment, and I see that she values the same things I do. I want you to know that you have my blessing, provided you continue to honor the values you hold dear. And remember, respect and honesty are far more important than wealth or status. You have both in abundance." He left the meeting feeling a sense of accomplishment and gratitude, knowing that the path ahead, though not without challenges, was one he could walk with pride. In the weeks and months that followed, Raj and Meera's bond grew stronger. They faced small obstacles, occasional misunderstandings, differences in lifestyle, and the occasional judgment from outsiders. But each challenge strengthened their commitment. They learned to communicate openly, to compromise when necessary, and to celebrate each other's differences rather than fear them. At the garage, Raj continued his work with the same dedication, but now with a deeper sense of fulfillment. Customers noticed a new energy about him, a quiet confidence that radiated from his smile and his careful attention to detail. Samir often teased him good-naturedly. "You've changed, Raj. You're happier. I think it's the girl." "It's not just the girl," he said quietly. "It's knowing that someone believes in me. That makes all the difference." She often reflected on the night of the prank dinner, amazed at how a setup meant for amusement had led to a genuine and life-changing connection. One evening, under a sky painted with the soft hues of sunset, Raj and Meera walked hand in hand along a quiet riverside. The water reflected the golden glow, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers from nearby gardens. They paused on a small bridge, looking out at the shimmering surface. "I still can't believe how it all started," Meera said softly, leaning slightly against him. "A prank of all things, and yet here we are." Sometimes, the things we least expect turn out to be the most important. No matter how different our worlds are, I know we can face anything together. As night fell, they walked back toward the city, their hands intertwined, their steps in sync. The journey that had begun with a prank had transformed into a story of love, respect, and unexpected joy. Raj and Mira had discovered that true connection transcended wealth, status, and appearances. It thrived on authenticity, mutual respect, and the willingness to see the person beneath the surface. And as they continued their journey together, both knew one simple truth. Life's most beautiful moments often came from the most unexpected beginnings. A joke that could have embarrassed them instead revealed something far more important: love, trust, and the chance to build a future together, hand in hand, heart to heart. They pranked a poor mechanic with a blind date, but the CEO's daughter whispered, "I like him."